Hi again, it's Lewis here in the Manx Radio newsroom, back with another episode of Newscast. Today's extended interviews were recorded last night at the First Church of Christ Scientist on Woodbourne Road in Douglas, where a public meeting was held to discuss the lack of an available night shelter on the island. Firstly, here's Kat Jenkins, who's helping spearhead this new campaign.
I'm really concerned because I know that some of the people who had cause to need that night shelter will still have that need. There is nothing at the moment. Gry closed in September last year. We heard words from government that something would be provided to replace it fairly soon. Then we heard that there was a strategy. We're now like 3/4 of a year later. We've been through a really cold winter. That need hasn't gone away. The busiest night that I had in Gry was 8 people there. And that's quite a lot of people to be needing a roof over their head for the night. You know, those people still have that need. And in a society as well-resourced as ours is, times are tough, but we're still one of the better-off countries in the world. We cannot just abandon people to the streets.
You said what you want to see is a shelter before we face another winter, like you said, without one. Venue, though, there's a question mark over where this could possibly be held.
Yeah, so in the past we were really lucky. One of the Douglas churches gave us a downstairs room in one of their properties, and that was absolutely fantastic. It might be that we end up relying on a faith organisation again, because it does quite often end up being organisations like that help people out. But it might be that there's somewhere else, whether a local authority has a space available or something of that ilk. Ideally, something that can be divided so that men and women can feel safe and sleep separately, and that has facilities for making people a hot drink, or ideally some food, and needs toilet facilities and so forth. So there are some things that it needs to have, but it doesn't need to be huge. And while it would be great to have something really comfortable with beds and so on and so forth, something is far better than nothing. So I've heard it said we can't be putting people on dusty mattresses in church halls. Actually, you can if the alternative is being out in the rain and the cold.
You say you had experience in Lancaster, was that right?
Yeah, so I'm a recovered alcoholic, and I spent some time in rehab in Lancashire, and when I finished that, I stayed away for another 6 months to make sure that I could put into practice the things that I needed to. And so I worked for that time for Citizens Advice in Lancaster and Morecambe, and there homeless issues are really prevalent, but they do have homelessness legislation. So whenever the temperature dropped below a certain level, local authorities were legally bound to go and round up all the people who are on the streets and get them in somewhere warm for the night. And that's something I'd really love to see happening over here.
That was something Peter Karran said he would like to see push forward. Is that a big thing for you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So a homelessness act for the island would seem like an obvious next step. It takes time. Somebody said it can take 18 months for legislation to go through Tynwald, but Peter gave examples of when things have been done very quickly, and we remember in COVID, legislation was brought onto the books really fast, and this is an emergency, just like that. It just happens to affect people that we don't see.
But you cited the cost of living as well.
Yeah, so I think, as I said, the maximum number of people I saw in the shelter in one night was 8. The colleagues might have seen more than that. Sometimes there were none. Often there were 2 or 3. Sometimes there were people for quite long periods of time. That need is not going to have gone down in a cost of living crisis. People will not be able to pay their rents. They won't be able to pay their other bills. So the need isn't going to shrink.
Just a final word. You mentioned that it's a problem that's easily ignored on the Isle of Man. Do you think people are really aware of the island's homeless? Is it a hidden homeless problem?
It's a really hidden homeless problem. So many of the people that we would see would have been tucking themselves away in a church graveyard. I think one person spent a winter sleeping in a graveyard in Onken. Lots of people are sofa surfing. We had many people who'd been sleeping in cars for quite a long time, and that's not comfortable or healthy. So they're not on the streets like they are in some of the big cities in the UK, and that makes it very easy to ignore or even pretend that it's not happening.
Kat Jenkins there. Well, alongside Kat at the head of the meeting was former Onchan and Middle MHK Peter Karran.
Well, the point is that what we need a catalyst to get the impasse sorted out. The problem is that we've changed it. We've got a great public service, but the public service needs to work for the public and not for themselves. And the situation is that this issue should have been high on the agenda as far as that's concerned. The reality is that we've got to get away from Tynwald being some sort of Disney club into actually doing things that are needed in our society. We have a major problem with housing at the moment, which is going to be a growing factor. And this is starting at the bottom, and maybe we can work up and get a proper strategy that's based on the success of how we look after the individuals and not the operations of government.
You think some politicians have a rose-tinted view of the Isle of Man?
Well, I mean, they always did. I can remember when we made it illegal to sell unroadworthy vehicles, the argument that we nearly lost the vote on was, well, what would the poor people drive if we didn't do that? I mean, this is nothing new. The situation is that the system has been altered. Some of the things that I campaigned for, get rid of the department pay and things like that was used as a weapon to silence people. I mean, tonight there are people who work for government who won't be prepared to say anything publicly, because if they do, the institutions of government will be used as a weapon against them. That's why I've always argued that we need honest, transparent party politics, not this effective one-party state by patronage.
And tell us a bit more about that Homeless Act. What would that look like in your eyes? And we heard from Kat as well mention about what it was like in Lancashire. Is that the sort of model you'd like to look at?
What I think is we need a Homeless Act. The reality is that the housing crisis is getting worse, not better, especially with the interest rates going up. Most of the people were under the government mortgage scheme, and so long as we terrorise the old chairman of the Treasury with keeping the rates down and keeping public opinion aware of how we didn't want it back in the 80s to 15.5%. Today it's more urgent that we need something done as a matter of today we need something done as a matter of urgency. The issue is, what I hope is at the next meeting, maybe we can have some sort of paper and let's see where we can get the impasse. The celebration of our society should be how we look after the weakest. And people who are homeless, there shouldn't be that in this day and age.
Peter Karran there, and as well as former MHKs, there was two current MHKs in the audience as well. John Wannenberg of Douglas North and Jason Moorhouse of Arbory, Castletown and Malew, who I caught up with afterwards to get his impression of what was said.
It's a really important issue. There are gaps that we need to fill. I've asked questions linked to this, and we need to be more proactive. I think that was really good because we had ordinary people meeting up and saying, let's do something.
Talking about data, that was a question, people wanting to see hard data about the island's homeless figures. You say you've asked questions about it before, but you've not been satisfied with the answer.
Well, the problem is that for 8 to 9 people to be homeless this evening, to me, is a huge number. But for the Council of Ministers, it appears to be a number they can tolerate, and that is a concern. So I think we actually need to think of these individual people with individual needs and find specific solutions.
A Homeless Act was mentioned as well from Mr. Karran. Is that something you'd be willing to ask a question about?
Definitely, yeah, definitely. We need to move that forward and get change, because it's a small number of people, but each of these people need a solution that could help massively.
Jason Moorhouse there. Well, that's all for now, and it's hoped there'll be a follow-up meeting in early August. Exact time and place still to be confirmed. You can find pictures and more information about last night's meeting on our main news page. For now, I'm Lewis Foster. Guru Mayed, thanks for listening.
Thank you for making it to the end of the Little Manx Radio newscast. You are obviously someone with exquisite taste. May I politely suggest you might want to subscribe to this and a wide range of Manx Radio podcasts at your favourite podcast provider, so our best bits will magically appear on your smartphone. Thank you.